Hey there. Welcome to Flute 360, the podcast that empowers flutists to find and own their unique voice both on and off the stage. You are the instrument. Let's get creative in ways that make your voice feel organic, authentic, and confident. A voice that transcends into every note you play. By embracing who you are, this confidence will naturally spill over into your entire music career. Hop on board the Flute 360 train and unlock the best music making of your life. Today's episode is episode 307. Own the Stage. Tools for Unleashing Your Musical Identity with Dr. Angela Beeching. Hey, Flute 360er. Are you ready to take your playing and career to the next level? No need to worry about time or money. Our Flute 360 Accelerator is completely accessible. With plans starting as low as $37, you can learn on the go at your own pace. Gain access to invaluable resources, personal coaching, and connections that you won't find in traditional settings. Tier 1 gives you direct access to me and other 360ers like you, along with amazing mentors like Stephen Clark, Jolene Madewell, and Catherine Eminent. Click the links in the show notes below and join a community that's designed to elevate you.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Angela. How are you?
I'm good. I was, just to prep a little bit for this, I was just listening to most of the podcasts you did with Adrian. And then while I was on a violinist kick, so Renee's, it's just really great. So I really appreciate how open and enthusiastic you are. So
I so appreciate that. Thank you, especially coming from you. I am honored. That's amazing. That's the best comment I could ever receive. Yeah. Well, thank you for prepping and listening to other podcast episodes. Yeah. That's very kind of you.
No, but it's great. And I mean, you've got over 300, a lot of people don't make it past the first 6 months. I guess it's like marriage that way.
So true. No, and my better half, Heidi Kay Begay, is actually the audio engineer. So if I didn't have him, I couldn't either A, afford it, or B, be able to go past, 20 episodes. But Wow. It actually started off as my dissertation, Flute 360.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And so I ended up really loving it just because of, obviously, for obvious reasons of sitting down and picking experts' brains like yourself. But more importantly, building relationships. I'm a very human person and I love hugs and I'm a social butterfly. And so sitting down and building these relationships with host to guest is really important to me. But then even more importantly to my listeners and getting to meet amazing flutists and musicians across the globe that I would have never met if it wasn't for the platform.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people find the perfect kind of project to explore life in a way that really deepens who they are and what they bring to the world.
Ooh, I love how you said that. Yes. And it's funny you say that because I feel like that's how I get to explore life and further my learning as a musician and as a person, but in a very me way. I love to talk. And it's not because I love to hear my voice, but it's because I love to share ideas. I love to help students connect the dots. And so you're right. This medium is really, it feels like home for me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, enough about the platform and podcasting. I'm so appreciative that you reached out to me in August. And I'm so glad that we're able to do this now. Yeah. You are a busy lady, and I am such a huge fan of your works. I have been on your newsletter for quite some time, and just the information that you share in the newsletters and your book and your other presentations and things that you're about, I am such a fan girl. Like I geek out over your output. So thank you for your contributions to our community.
Well, you're very welcome. And I'm thrilled to be doing this with you.
Yeah. So with that being said, for the listeners who may not know you, maybe we can start with like your background and how you ended up getting to where you are in your career now as a music coach and all of the wonderful things that you have your hands on. So I think most musicians know who you are. They'd have to live underneath a rock to have not heard your name. But if you want to bring the listener a little up to the current point in your backstory, that would be fantastic.
Sure. I hope I can do this in a concise way, but I started out as a cellist. If someone had told me when I was 20 or 30 that I was ever going to be doing this work as a music career coach, I would have said, you're crazy, because I was just totally fixated on the instrument. Yeah, I was one of those kids in school when they would try to have talks about career issues, and I was just not having any of it. So it is kind of ironic that this is how it turned out for me. But I early on had it in my head that I wanted to teach at the college level. I wanted to have a tenure track teaching job that would give me a chance to play a lot of chamber music, because that was really a passion. And when I was in grad school, I was the kind of student who complains to the department. And I complained because back in those days, there was no music career office or entrepreneurship center. None of that stuff existed. And I said, we could really use some help in these areas. And the chair of the department, this was at Stony Brook out on Long Island, he said, write us a proposal. So I didn't even know what a proposal was. I wrote up something, I handed it in thinking, okay, they're going to make this happen. And they turned around and said, we're going to make this your teaching assistantship. You get to start this thing, which was intimidating and also like the best education you could ever have. So I did that and then, finished the doctorate and did a bunch of other stuff. My goal was to teach at the college level. And I'm like to say, I'm one of those people that gets what they have in mind and only then realizes, whoa, this isn't the way I pictured it.
Ooh.
So I had a college teaching job in cello in California and then in upstate New York. And I got burnt out. And I don't know if it was wasn't the right fit with the school, but it was like a huge deal. Because my whole identity revolved around being a cellist.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing about the grief process and trying to figure out, okay, who am I now? All of that junk. So I moved back to Boston because I had friends there. And eventually this job opened up at New England Conservatory running the Career Center. And because at that time, very few people had this kind of experience doing that kind of work, they hired me. And I thought, I'll do this for a little bit and see, until I figure out what I really want to do with my life. And I was at NEC for 17 years because I love helping musicians find their own path. I mean, that is really the work that I do. It's about helping people get more of their best work out into the world so they can finally become the artists they are meant to be. And it's fascinating to me because it's a different path for each person. And I find that work liberating and really inspiring. And because there wasn't a career guide at the time and I was teaching career courses, I researched and wrote the book. And after NEC, I did some work at Indiana University and then Manhattan School of Music. And now I'm out on my own as a music career coach. And that itself was also a big thing because I'd always had a side project, a side hustle. But finally, to have to become the thing that you've been advising people on and you really see, all of the fear about how the sausage is actually made. And yeah. So anyway, I love this work.
That's fantastic. And there's so many things you said in that, Angela, that I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I could go down 10 different rabbit holes with you, and this conversation would be 10 hours long. But the identity piece, That
Yeah.
is huge. That is huge. And so when you work with musicians, either on a one-to-one basis or in a group effort, do you feel like that's I'm using air quotes, the air quote hang up with most musicians in identifying so much with their instrument and so much with that position, so much with that title, that if it doesn't pan out that way, they feel like they failed or they feel like
Yeah.
they couldn't be possibly something else. Does that resonate with you with the clients that you work with? And I totally resonate and empathize because I was the same way when I finished my DMA. It was the identity of that one academic job. It was being
Right.
that one thing. And then when you take the blinders and lift them off a little bit, and you see
Yeah.
these amazing pieces of breadcrumbs and these opportunities here, there, and you get to form your own gingerbread house. It feels fulfilling. And it's like, oh, this isn't what I had expected,
Yeah.
but this is beautiful in of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, we are all kind of victims of our own mindset. This is a very typical thing for musicians to grow up with idolizing, teachers or kinds of positions and only believing that there is just that one flavor of success. And sometimes it takes a big upset in your life to be even willing to look at other possibilities. And it's so awful. It's just like the typical hero's journey or heroine's journey. You got to hit that, nadir. You got to hit the point of no return, the dark night of the soul, to start to question these things that you believed about who you really are and
Okay.
discover more possibilities. So it's a typical thing that people go through and go through stages of this at different points in their lives. But the whole point is that we have these gifts. We have a gift that's not just about performing. It's a way of connecting with people. It's a way of being in the world. And people have a lot of different possibilities of how to really make a contribution and feel gratified. So
Okay.
I have a lot of clients, actually two this week on who are applying for college teaching jobs. And I have pretty frank conversations about this with them. And at the same time, trying to help them put their best foot forward, really see their strengths and communicate that in their materials.
Ooh, I love that. Yes. So with that identity piece and musicians having perhaps hangups over, I am going to be that academic flute professor, or I'm going to be, right? And when the cards aren't dealt the way that they had assumed or predicted, and they have to pivot, they find themselves, like you said, you hit a wall, and there's always the silver lining in tragedy. It makes you, especially when tragedy strikes and things don't pan out the way you thought it would, it almost feels like the rug has been pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And what I say is then when you're on the ground, you have a choice. You can either moan and cry, which is, I've been there, I empathize.
Yep.
You can moan and cry and throw your fit and go, I'm on the ground, this hurts. Or you can make it your choice and say, okay, yes, that happened. Let me grieve that. I banged up my knee, but I get to now reinvent myself. I'm down here. What's around me? And you get to reinvent
Yeah.
yourself. So what's the biggest piece, nugget, gem that you would offer a flutist if they find themselves in this situation right now in the season that they are, where the tables have turned? Their identity for so long was X, but now they are being asked to pivot. What is something that you would advise this person?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, I can't think of any musician doesn't have, multiple tracks to their careers, but they might not have been thinking of it this way. So that thing about even just do a little bit of journaling and ask yourself in the past week, where was I having peak moments of inspiration or discovery or fascination, right? With anything. Because sometimes I run into people who have been so beat up by the audition process or whatever, the job search, that they've lost track that there are real moments of the things that they're really grateful for in their life. So this place of just tracking what is inspiring to me, what would I be wanting to pursue, whether or not I'm paid, right? Things that I'm reading, things that I'm exploring, because those are often hints to what you want to go deeper on. And I think that that place, even just of discovering that, so many times people might feel like they've hit a dead end with the private teaching that they've been doing, and they're feeling again burnt out. And then even just to ask, okay, what in the teaching is going well? What are you excited about? And if you were going to be doing some additional performing, right, in the next month or so, what would you most want to do? What's a project that would really get you excited? And that often leads to, conversations with other people and brainstorming. And those projects can only come to fruition if you're willing to admit to yourself, yeah, I would like to do this, and then speak it out loud.
Oh, I love that. 1000% yes. There was a time in my teaching career where I was burnt out in teaching one-to-one lessons over and over and over again. Now, I love teaching. I'm an educator at heart. I love sharing and connecting the dots. But I realized exactly what you said. I find myself burnt out or really depleted is the better word. I feel depleted when I teach little ones. Now, I'm an auntie. I love little kids with all my heart. They bring so much joy and wonderment to my day. But teaching a 6-year-old versus a 26-year-old is night and day. And to each their own. Some people like Earl Grey tea and some people like orange zest. And for me, the Earl Grey was just so depleting because those little ones require a different type of energy and a different soul who feels really inclined to teach the kinder flutists. And I thought I had to teach everyone under the sun. I thought I had to go from 6 years old to 76 years old and everything in between. But come to find out, I really thrive with the 26-year-olds to 46-year-olds and flutists who are going back to school in a gap year, post DMA. And that's what was the fuel to my fire. And I could do that all day long. So I think the piece that you just said is so crucial. And kind of in a weird way, there's probably a better word for this, but I'm going to use the word selfish. Almost be selfish in a way of stating that out loud, because seeing is believing. And when you say, you know what, I'm not a kinder flute teacher, I am a gap year flute teacher. There's nothing wrong with claiming that identity and what fuels you. And I think, full circle, I think a lot of people are afraid of being selfish in that way.
Oh, well, I don't know that I would call it selfish. I think a lot of people are just afraid to turn down work. And so they're afraid to be that upfront in their marketing materials and say, when they're describing their teaching and their studio, what it's really about. But you, just to be efficient, right? For all those people out there who might be looking for a flute teacher, they don't want to go down a rabbit hole that's not the right thing for them. So it's our job, as the provider of whatever service we've got, to be as clear and as upfront with who we really are. That's the deal, whether you're writing your performance bio or your teaching bio or whatever it is. And I think that this all goes back to like your why, your focus on knowing your why. That thing about what really gets me up in the morning. What am I really excited about? What is it I want my students to experience? What is it I want my audiences to experience? Those are the kinds of questions when I'm working with clients that, we all approach self-promotion like I have to put on some kind of fake veneer to suddenly look really professional. And I don't dare say who I really am, but I'm all after getting people to answer some uncomfortable questions so that they can really feel like it's their true self that they are inviting people to connect with. As if you stop hiding that way, it's a lot easier to walk out on stage. as your real self. Same thing. It's a lot easier to, teach that guest master class because you're not pretending to be something that you don't really believe.
Oh, yes, completely. Oh my gosh, you and I are speaking the same language. I love it. I feel validated. I'm like, see, Angela Beeching feels the same way. Oh, I love that. Do you think maybe the way that musicians are trained in academia, in our culture, in studios, no dissing anybody or throwing anyone under the bus, but just the way we're trained, we feel like, and just the way the culture is, we feel like we have to have that facade or we have to show up in that polish. I forget the exact verbiage you used, but we have to show up in a certain way to be accepted or to, you know what I mean? Like, is it just the way we've been trained?
Well, there's a long history of all that stuff, right? There's all of the LP jackets that we've seen of big deal people. It's like, oh, that's how I'm supposed to look. So I run into people all the time when they're working on their website that they want to just model this off of their hero, and they're not at all thinking about who they really are. So this is not anything against flutists. I love flutists. But there is a thing, it's a little bit the way singers are with their websites, especially for female flutists. There's like this glamour thing that's supposed to be happening. And it's like this extra level of belief that you have to look the part.
Okay.
And I think it really hangs people up, because when I'm talking to people about what makes a good promo photo, let's say, this is this thing. I remember this photographer I used to work with in Boston who would say, your photo should look like you on a good day, not like you all gussied up, like, who the hell is that? If they, walk down the street, I don't recognize this person. And that's part of a weird exercise I like to give people of coming up with 5 adjectives that describe the version of you that you want not just your photos to convey, but your whole website, your bio, all of that stuff. Like, what's at the core of why you do what you do? What is that? And so often people will give me adjectives like, I want to come across as intelligent, good looking. Maybe I want to come across as younger than I am or older than I am, or professional or accessible. And I'm thinking, yeah, come on, those are the basics. We're all expecting that. But, if you're saying like, okay, what is it that makes me tick as a musician? And if I'm going to really communicate this, and I want to have a cohesive site that seems consistent with my messaging, then we start to think about promo materials differently.
Okay. Yeah. Really finding that unique thumbprint and identifying exactly who you are, Jane or Joe, rather than who you think you or how you should be portrayed to the rest of the industry or the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a relief. That's the thing that I find over and over again when people have gone through this process. And it means that they're showing up not just in performances with a new level of confidence, but in their networking, in, negotiating fees, all of this stuff. I mean, what a relief to say, oh, I'm enough. I can really be myself.
Yeah. And that element of performance on stage and coming to the stage and to your listeners and your audience members with that authentic self. The minute I felt that as a performer in my professional career, it was life-changing. It was so freeing to say, oh, I don't have to sound like another flutist. I don't have to look like another flutist. I don't have to dress like another flutist. If I can just be authentically me, the stage fright, the performance anxiety, it melts away. It truly does. And it sounds too good to be true, but it really does, because then you know your mannerisms, you know what makes you tick, oh, I'm kind of dorky. I'm kind of witty. I like to talk with my hands. I like to laugh at myself. In owning that piece, then you can't be upset then with like a mistake here or there, because you're focused on this bigger message and the bigger why you're sharing this beautiful music with other people in your most personalized, authentic way. And it feels gratifying and freeing all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true and so good. And it seems like such a mystery when we're not there, right? Like, how the hell do I get there?
Yep.
So I recently created a tool, a kind of visualization tool for helping people with a piece of this. And this came from just working with my clients and thinking this through, because what I found was there's a specific area of stage presence that has to do with claiming your space on stage, with that sense of I can walk out on stage and I feel like I am really here and I'm not apologizing, physically. I'm not like shrinking into myself. And I have to say, for women, and I also think for anyone who has felt marginalized in their life in any way, there can be a sense of not feeling empowered to take up their space. Women are
Interesting.
women are often, on some level socialized to stay quiet, to stay small, to not make demands, all of that stuff. And it's weird because you walk out on stage, you actually need to do the opposite.
Right. Take up space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're experiencing performance anxiety, there's this thing about, because we're feeling fear, there's a kind of contracting that goes on even in the body. So it means we're not breathing with all of our, all of our
Extremities.
yeah. And so we're getting smaller in some ways to feel, either to feel protected or to whatever, when we actually need to do the opposite. So I created a visualization for this, for that exact issue. And
And what is that?
I'm happy to walk you through it now.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
listeners, if you're willing,
Yeah. I can't wait.
yeah, it's about an 8-minute visualization, so it's not super, super quick. But what I'm hoping is that when people try this and really kind of lean into it, just to notice, okay, what does feel different in my body? What, and if you were practicing this and taking it, on stage, before a next performance, what might this make possible? So for those of you at home, I hope you'll, give this a whirl, but not if you're driving. So we want you to be safe. And I'm going to invite everybody to close their eyes if they're comfortable with that, or lower their gaze, because we want to tune in to our own sensations. This is claiming your expansive space. In your mind's eye, see yourself standing center stage in an empty concert hall. You have the whole space to yourself, and you're looking out into the darkened rows of seats in front of you. The stage is lit, so you can feel the warmth of the stage lights like the sun on your forehead, your eyelids, and on your lifted chest. Now, do what dancers do. Picture balancing a large diamond on your sternum, just below your collarbones. That diamond catches the stage light and reflects it out into the audience. With your chest lifted, you're beaming light and energy out to the very last row in the hall. Take a deep belly breath, filling yourself up with air, inhaling it all the way up and over the top of your head, and then let it go like a silk curtain down your back. Breathe it all out. Now, stand tall with your feet shoulder width apart, your knees soft, your neck relaxed, and sense the energy of the earth rising to meet you. Feel rooted and resilient. Adding to this, envision a thread extending from the very top of your head up into the heavens, gently elongating your spine. Feel your energy easily flowing through your upper spine and releasing from the top of your head. And below, feel your energy extending down through your lower spine and hips, through your legs, and down into the earth beneath your grounded feet. Breathe into all of your space as you stand tall in the light. And know that both your breath and your energy are constantly flowing into and through you, connecting you with all the world. So now, sensitize your awareness to the space around you in that imagined concert hall. Feel into the space that's to your left and to your right. Sense the space that's above your head. And now feel and breathe into the space that's behind your body. There's more to you than the physical space your body occupies. Feel for the energy that your body radiates into the space around you. The fierce, vibrant, generous life force of you. Balance yourself and your energy in the whole concert space. Breathe into it. You might sense that you've got a 2 or 3 foot field of energy that extends around you. Dial that energy up and see if you can double the size of your field as you breathe into it. Claim your full space. This isn't about having a big ego. It's not about being arrogant or defensive. It's not about crowding anyone else's space. It's about being open-hearted and generous and bringing all of you into the world. Because here's the thing. No one can give you your space and no one can take it away. It's your birthright. But you need to step into and activate it. You need to claim it to be fully present in the world. So now, make a promise to yourself. No more apologizing for taking up your space. There's plenty of room for all of you, and you are fully welcome on stage, just as you and all your energy are fully welcome in the world. In fact, life has been waiting for you to show up whole. When you make a regular practice of taking up your full space and standing tall in it, you'll find you have more room for those surges of performance energy to circulate in. By making this exercise part of your practice routine, you can feel more present and welcome in all the spaces you move through. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
How wonderful. I don't want to switch back to host mode.
What did you experience, Heidi? What was that like for you?
Exhilarating, very content. And I almost felt like when you were talking about the energy in the space behind me, I felt very expansive.
Wow.
And it felt freeing because it's not just me and the audience members that I was envisioning, in that black space forward, because we're facing forward.
Yeah.
But it felt very comforting to have this space and energy behind me and for me to recognize that it's there, where it feels more like a bear's hug.
Yeah. That's so great. There's other visualizations that I teach people, but there's this wonderful tool called Grateful Flow. I teach a lot of the tools that Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels originated, these two fabulous therapists in LA. They work with a lot of people in the creative industries. Anyway, that thing about the space, like the back body space, it's a wonderful thing to picture, like all of the love in the world that in a way, or all of our ancestors, all of the goodness that's possible in life is also back there, and we can be translating that forward. So almost as if you're like a prism, that right through your heart energy. And that thing about not feeling alone and not feeling separate from people is such a huge reason why we have the arts. It's why we have music, to make this sense of oneness. So that's great that you are really tuned into that energy behind. And I think it's a great way to figure out, how can I channel that so that I can feel even more like this connector.
Yeah, it felt like a warm hug. It felt like even just the awareness of my skin on my back.
Yeah.
You know?
I love this kind of stuff because I don't remember anyone ever talking about these kinds of things, in music school. And again, it's not to blame, the kind of system that we all came up from. There's not enough time to give people everything that they need. But I run into an awful lot of musicians that aren't connected to their body in a much more kind of holistic way. And so having a regular practice, yoga or meditation or qigong or tai chi, there's so many ways to help feel more connected and have a more real experience, a more embodied experience of life. It's not just how do I feel when I walk out on stage, but that sense of being fully present and feeling accepted in the universe. That's a practice. And I just think it's a wonderful thing to have teachers or coaches that are helping people move forward in those areas.
How wonderful. Yes to all of that. That's what podcasting taught me.
That's great.
That's why I'm a huge advocate for musicians to podcast for various reasons. There are so many layers to this, and I won't go and get on my soapbox because my listeners know how I feel about podcasting. But it gave me permission to take up that space, because when I showed up as an early podcaster, I was showing up to sound like somebody else, because what did they, the listeners, did they, the guests, what did they expect from me? And I was trying to match that expectation that I made up in my head. Kind of trying to be like a Katie Couric or an Oprah Winfrey, right? And then realizing midway, like after 100 episodes, like, that's not me. I talk with my hands. I'm not dignified and poised and use these fancy words. Like, this is who I am. I'm Mrs. Chatterbox. So owning that, of course, listening and being a person to hold space for somebody who's sharing their ideas, but showing up in that very authentic way of saying, this is how I express myself with my vocabulary, my mannerisms, my facial expressions, my body language. It gave me that permission to tap back into my roots, kind of like you were talking about ancestry and, things like that, to tap back into my roots. And by doing that, by showing up and podcasting pretty much every day or every other day for the last 6 years, it's a practice. It's a practice. And getting to practice articulating my ideas, I'm not very good at this, but cohesively from beginning to end, that's a phrase. And then being able to ebb and flow with my guest, that's ensemble work. That's what we do with our accompanist or, the small chamber. Listening for intonation, listening for cues from you, for my listeners. Who we are as musicians, we need to listen, right? And just that energy and flow and the way you want to say things. It was a practice in podcasting. And I found I ended up working on myself, the first instrument, more and more and more and more. And by doing that deep work of what I'm passionate about, how I want to say things, what brings me to life, how can I serve my people in my most authentic way? I started lighting up. And then when the flute came to my face, magic happened, because the flute is just an extension. It's an amplification of what's already here within. And all that work, all of the mess of anxiety and not getting to say what I wanted to say through the flute became so second nature now because of the practice of podcasting, articulating these ideas, the flute and phrasing and those nuances that I was trying so hard to get came organically for me.
Huh. Okay. That's, first of all, that's amazing. But we all know that not everybody's going to be podcasting. Not everybody's going to find that thing. And I've just been very interested. I've got a new book. It's not anywhere near coming out yet, but on finding your own voice as an artist. And so that piece of what can we do in the practice room that is, building this habit of making real artistic choices and prioritizing, finding our way, as opposed to mimicking our heroes or getting stuck in perfectionism and all of the negative self-talk when it's not coming out the way we want it to. So I'm just curious, Heidi, when you're working with people who aren't finding, podcast is not going to be their thing.
Yeah.
What have you found that helps people be willing to actually explore, what do I want to say in this phrase or in this piece?
Yes. So it kind of circles back to your ancestral roots comments. And of the 300 people I have been able to interview for this podcast, I use that not as a token of pride in, inflating my ego, but more or less like the experience behind talking with 300 people. I mean, that's a blessing in of itself. I've heard one common theme from most people, and it's that ancestral piece that you gave. And going back to your roots, go back to your younger self, your childhood, and think of 3 to 5 things that were in your environment, activities, things that you were drawn to. So for example, Christopher Caliendo, who's a composer, he's actually married to my best friend. And I knew her before she was Caliendo. So Kristen. And when I was talking with him, he goes, I was trying to find my compositional voice. And I was trying to figure out my place in this music industry. Now, this is public information. This isn't like family stuff that I'm airing out. Right. And he realized, he's like, I'm Italian. We made pizza and lasagna and all of these pasta dishes. And I was really drawn to, as a little boy, the old Western films and comic books. And he goes, I had this aha moment one day as a young man. I noticed the compositional style and the works and the mediums in which I was drawn to as a composer. I was writing for film. I was writing for the stage. I was writing these fast, hard lick pieces that sounded like music that you would hear in salsa or, Wild Wild West films and also this like Italian flair, and he's like, oh, that's me. That's me, and we forget it because maybe in a way with the training and going off to school and becoming an adult, we have adult responsibilities and we forget those roots. You know what I mean? Yeah. So full circle. And I've heard the same thing from Michael Lynn, one of the flute professors at Oberlin. He, said one day he was sitting, this is again, a public conversation, that he was sitting in his Oberlin faculty and realizing, oh my gosh, like when I was raised, my mother would bring home these ancient instruments as a little boy. I was around these period instruments all the time. We had a harpsichord. I had these period instruments growing up, and look at the work that I'm doing now. And it's kind of like this pinch me moment, Yeah. And so full circle back to how I can help somebody find their roots is going back to what are the 3 to 5 things that define you or defined you as a child? Was it the pizza making? Was it the Wild Wild West films? Was it Superman? And what you'll end up finding is these little gems or tokens of long lost memories that perhaps you forgot about. And you can reignite that passion. And maybe that medium, that art, can be the way like podcasting is for me, for you. So I was a ballerina. I was a pianist. I love to share stories. And that was a huge part of who I was as a little girl. Now, when I forgot about dance, I put everything into compartments. So when I went off to music school, I think this is a big thing too for a lot of musicians. I put music over in, that was something I did in my past life. And I
Mhm.
didn't bring those lessons into music
Right.
making and being on stage. I love being in my body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And disassociating with that and saying, oh, that's for the dancer. Then when I came onto stage as a flutist, I felt awkward and weird and
Yeah.
like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? But then for me to come full circle and go, wait a second, you know how to move to music. You know what movements make sense in this phrase or would add to this or take away. Like, you know what to do innately. You're a dancer. You move to music.
Yeah.
That piece was so freeing. So what I would say to somebody who has been disassociated with that world, with their
Mhm.
roots in their childhood, going back to your encouragement of journaling, figure out
Yeah.
what those 3 to 5 pieces are, reclaim that, and find that medium or art to tap back into to
Yeah.
pull lessons from crocheting, hiking that can rekindle that and for you to feel whole again. So when you come to the instrument, it's not this dissociation. It's not this disconnection of me and the instrument, but it's this
Yeah.
wholeness.
Yeah. That's great. There's the author, George Saunders. He wrote Lincoln and the Bardo. He writes all the short stories. He's amazing. I'm on his Substack because I'm very interested in narrative and in writing. And he gave us this exercise where you write down in like 5-year increments in your life, which is like way more nerdy than most of us want to do, but what your major influences were.
Okay.
And that's where, and he says, don't judge, right? It's not, it's like, it's not, we're only going to put the high art stuff. If we're binge watching stuff, we're going to put that in there because all of that goes into like a big cauldron of who we are, like how we express ourselves, what our voice is actually like, whether we're writers or whether we're musicians or painters or anything else. And I did a version of this exercise where, you're in the practice room and you're thinking of a phrase that you find intriguing. Maybe it's from something that you're working on recently and you just play it in your mind's ear and you hear it the way you want it to, not a copy of someone else's version, but really this is the ideal arc of this phrase and this is the way I experience that phrase as truth, right? And then ask yourself, what are the influences that went into that version that you've just created? And what I like to say to people is, don't just think of like your favorite recordings or your hero or what your teacher said about this phrase. No, think about these other quirky things from your life. The films that kind of like really spoke to you, the novels, the dancers. I did this recently and I was thinking of like Josephine Baker and I was thinking of, just these artistic influences that have something to do with the wit and the way of looking at life. And I found, again, this can be really freeing if you're just asking yourself, how do I find a version of this phrase that is truly me and is not a knockoff of my favorite recording? So I love these experiments to help people kind of dial into their own truth.
Very well said. So, because we're both content creators and you're an author, I was kind of curious. And you mentioned like the reason why you're drawn to this work obviously is for that transformation for the artists themselves. And you feel called to do this work. Going back to the piece that you had said, nobody showed or nobody showcased these ideas to me when I was in school, right? Can I ask an intimate question?
Sure.
And that is when you were a cellist and finding your voice and being faculty at through all these prestigious institutions, did you feel like you were comfortable on stage or did you feel like you were still finding yourself? And then did you have to kind of coach yourself through it the way you're coaching other musicians through their own?
I would say I got to a certain point but I'm no longer a cellist. I call myself a recovering cellist. And I think the real finding my voice came through coaching and through teaching and through writing. But I can see now, I mean, in a way, I kind of reverse engineered, design the kind of practice room exercises that I think would have helped me the most.
Okay.
So that's where that claiming your expansive space exercise came from, because I know what it's like. I just think about this keynote address that I had to give at a National Keyboard Pedagogy Conference, years ago. I'd never done a keynote before, and I'd spoken a lot. I'd done a lot of teaching, but nothing like this. So I'm about ready to go out. It's a big conference room. There's like hundreds of people there. And I look, and they've got this gigantic Jumbotron set up behind the podium. And I'm having like a really bad hair day.
Oh, no.
And there's that moment before you're about to walk out on stage and, all the negative self-talk, all of the fears coming up big time. And you realize, well, I can either half-ass this and like apologetically, whatever, or I can just say, fuck it, I'm doing this. Let's
And
do
own
it.
it. Yep.
Yeah. And so there was this weird, and it was one of those things where almost your body takes over, because there's this adrenaline rush that can be used as a way to move ahead and get your voice out there. And that was what it was like. But not everybody will have that sense of, oh, I can either cave into the fear or I can almost get angry enough to energize myself in this positive way. So I'm always on the lookout for more tools to help with these kinds of issues.
I see. The content creator piece that I was trying to get at now will make more sense, because the way you're speaking, the activities that you're coming and forming up for your clients, I was wondering if you being an author helped you to really fine tune and find your authentic self. And
Yeah.
it sounds like it did. So whether
Yeah.
it's podcasting and talking through content, through conversation, or
Mm-hmm.
pen to paper and writing an article or a book with your
Yeah.
own ideas and being able to portray that, I think there's something there, because whether it's talking out content or writing out content, it lovingly encourages you to self-reflect. It lovingly encourages you to really be articulate with your ideas and say what you want to say.
Yeah. Well, what I love is this wonderful quote that Jeremy Denk, the pianist, had in his Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. He wrote this wonderful memoir about coming up as a pianist. And there's this fabulous passage. It was in the New Yorker article before it was in the book, where I don't know if it was in a recording session or what, or in a performance, or preparing for a performance, where he was working on some passage. And there was this moment where he realized, oh my God, I wish I could go right now to my mentors, my teachers, and get some advice on this particular passage. It was this, like, oh my God, do I have what it takes to do this? And he said, the passage, I'm not going to quote this well, but he said in what's going on in your mind is these various different opinions on that phrase from your various teachers. And somehow you have to get out past that to find out what it is that you want to do with this passage. And he ends up saying the only one that can solve the labyrinth of yourself is you. And that's just it. I think for some people, reaching to another medium is a help in this, and some people can do it just within the practice of the music itself. So podcast writing, teaching, of course, can be a wonderful way to help yourself step forward as a performer as well.
And finding that medium that enables you to reach that goal.
Yeah, because I think it's about, on some level, saying, okay, I've had all this wonderful training. I've had all of these influences. Now it's time for me to step forward, to step out on a limb and say, this is what I believe in this performance. This is what I want to put out there.
And maybe it's difficult for some musicians to get past that of the past mentors and teachers and their interpretations swirling around in our head to say what we want to say, because that requires trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Trust of your own ability, trust of your voice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the more risks we take, the easier that gets.
Very true.
I know for a lot of people, playing new music is a great way because they're not having to listen to 12 recordings, of their legendary, influences beforehand. It's so freeing to play something that no one else has heard yet.
That's a good point. Yeah. Oh, Angela, can I sit with you for the next 2 hours?
This was really fun. This was not, I know we talked a little bit about what all we'd covered and it was really, I really like exploring with you. And I loved how, you game for really putting this stuff out there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I really appreciate those words. And I feel I don't know how to say this the best way, but I will try my very best. I love this conversation with you, not only for the way you think and the way you are as a coach and the way you articulate these sometimes complex topics and complex ideas, but thank you so much for seeing me for who I am and letting me take up space and having this amazing dialogue where you made me feel so comfortable to explore these ideas on a deeper level where I didn't feel like I couldn't go there. You gave me that space. And I really feel like you understand me in such a short amount of time. And that's not always easy to do. And you have a gift. So that's what I can pick up on you and your personality and what you offer to this world. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Heidi. I mean, same back at you, because it takes two to tango. I really like this kind of conversation exploration. So great.
Same. Yeah. We did cover a lot, but is there anything that you want to leave the listener with as we're wrapping up our thoughts?
Yeah, I would love people to go to my site because there is this little gift that I give people when they sign up for my weekly newsletter, which you can unsubscribe at any time. But the gift that I want you to get is this thing called the Musician's Pathfinder Guide. I just want to say where I come from on this. People can get stuck in so many different ways in their career or in their thinking or in their artistic development. And so over the years, I've collected my favorite questions that help people start thinking a little differently or open them up into considering other options. So I put together this little guide with my 6 favorite questions. These are like the secret weapon of of coaching. And I just want to invite people to spend some time with those questions to answer them for themselves, because this is often the beginning point of being able to see new opportunities. And we're living in such a stressful, anxious time right now, so much uncertainty. That ability to go back and reflect on who you really are and what it is you want, or what it is you maybe have been afraid to dare. These are the kinds of questions that I think can be the best next step.
Perfect. And we really appreciate that. The last thing that I will say is I love your coaching style and the way you put pen to paper of these different ideas, because it's very to the point, it's very clear, it's very organized, and you have a clear end result in mind in the sense of like, I'm helping you think differently through this exercise, but it's done so colorfully and creatively that it catches my eye. And I really appreciate that work and how you package it together so eloquently.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. Considering how I felt this morning, I would say I don't think we're talking to the same person. No, but really, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much, Angela, for everything. And I will for sure put all of the necessary links in the show notes below. So you, the listener, if you're listening to this and you're like, where can I access her book and this and her newsletter? It's all in the show notes below. Just go ahead and click it, easy peasy. And we thank you so much, Angela, for your time, talents, and expertise. And you have been such a special treat in my day. And for the rest of 2024 and beyond, this has been a highlight for me. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome, Heidi, and thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Flute 360 podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, why not share it with your friends, students, and colleagues? When you share the podcast, you're not only helping others discover valuable insights, but you're also fostering a supportive community of flutists who can grow together. Plus, when your referrals join the 360 community, you could be featured in a future episode or get a shout out as our thank you. So, hit that share button and let's inspire more flutists to reach new heights. Let's talk about flute.